The alert sounded too gentle for what it signified. A soft chime, barely audible above the steady hum of laboratory equipment. Dr. Elena Maris glanced up from her microscope, momentarily disoriented as her eyes adjusted to the lab's stark lighting. The holographic display above her workstation flashed an innocuous message. Anomalous data detection. Elena frowned. She had been examining her own tissue sample, a standard procedure for all scientists newly arrived at the Aurelia 9 Interplanetary Biological Research Station. Nothing should have triggered an alert. "Computer, clarify anomaly parameters," she said, her voice steady despite the unease spreading through her chest. "Sample EM1103 exhibits cellular regeneration rates exceeding human baseline by 327%. The system responded in its neutral tone. Recommendation: flag for Interplanetary Medical Council review." Elena stared at the readout, her scientific mind immediately calculating implications. This was impossible. Her cells were healing at over 3 times the normal human rate. She had drawn the sample herself just hours ago. A simple biopsy to establish her biological baseline upon arrival at the station. "Computer, run diagnostics on sampling equipment and analysis protocols," she ordered, already knowing the system would find no errors. The Aurelia 9 station represented the pinnacle of biological research technology in 2275. "Diagnostics complete. All systems functioning within optimal parameters." Elena leaned back in her chair, the sterile air of the lab suddenly feeling too thin. As the first human physiologist assigned to Aurelia 9 following the devastating xenocell crisis, she understood the gravity of biological anomalies better than most. Humanity had nearly lost its foothold in space when the crisis struck 5 years ago, an incident that had left thousands of colonists with catastrophic cellular mutations after exposure to an alien microorganism. She tapped her wrist communicator. "Captain Mora? This is Dr. Maris. I need to speak with you about a concerning development." There was a brief pause before the station commander's voice responded. "My office. 15 minutes." Elena stood, her legs slightly unsteady. She carefully secured her sample and initiated the lab's sterilization protocol. As the blue light of the decontamination beam swept across her workspace, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed, not just in her cells, but in everything she understood about human biology. What she couldn't know then was how right she was, and how terrifying the truth would prove to be. Captain Mora's office reflected the utilitarian design philosophy of the station, functional, minimalist, with the only personal touch being a small hologram of Earth rotating slowly on her desk. The captain herself, a tall woman with the characteristic lean physique of someone who had spent most of her life in varying gravity conditions, stood with her back to the door, gazing out the viewport at the stars beyond. "Dr. Maris," she said without turning, "I've reviewed the preliminary alert from your lab. Explain to me how this is possible." Elena took a measured breath. "I can't, Captain. Not yet. The regeneration rate I'm seeing in my tissue sample defies current medical understanding. It would require genetic modifications far beyond what's legally permitted." Now Mora turned, her expression carefully neutral. "Are you declaring yourself as genetically modified, Doctor?" "No," Elena said firmly. "I've never undergone any genetic enhancement procedures. My medical history is completely transparent. It's in my file." Mora nodded once. "Then we have a mystery, one that the Interplanetary Medical Council will take great interest in." She returned to her desk and activated a secure communication channel. "In the meantime, I'm authorizing a full biological workup on you. Report to Medical Bay 3 at 0800 tomorrow." "Captain," Elena began, then hesitated. "Should I be concerned?" Something flickered across Mora's face, something that might have been sympathy, or perhaps fear. "We all should be, Doctor." The xenocell crisis taught us that much. Biological anomalies are never to be taken lightly. As Elena left the captain's office, she noticed a man waiting in the corridor outside, tall, with sharp features and the distinctive neural interface ports visible at his temples that marked him as a technical specialist. He studied her with open curiosity. "You're the anomaly," he said, not a question. Elena stopped. "And you are?" "Axel Wren, Chief Technical Officer." He fell into step beside her as she continued walking. "Word travels fast on a station this size." "That's unfortunate," Elena replied coolly, "since there's nothing to tell yet." Axel shrugged. "People are nervous about biological irregularities. Can't blame them after what happened on Europa." The reference to the epicenter of the xenocell crisis wasn't subtle. Elena stopped walking and turned to face him directly. "I had nothing to do with Europa. I was researching cellular regeneration in cancer patients on Earth when it happened." "Interesting field," Axel said, his eyes never leaving hers. "Especially given your current situation." Elena felt a chill run through her. "Is there something specific you want, Officer Wren?" "Just to offer my help," he said. "Technical systems have a way of revealing truths that biology tries to hide." Before Elena could respond, her communicator chimed with a message from medical. They wanted to begin preliminary tests immediately. She glanced back at Axel, who gave her a knowing look that sent another wave of unease through her. "We'll talk again, Dr. Maris," he said, before turning and walking away. The medical bay was clinically bright, the surfaces gleaming under harsh lighting that left no shadow unexposed. Dr. Lyra Cho, the station's chief medical officer, greeted Elena with professional detachment. "I understand you're exhibiting unusual cellular regeneration," she said, gesturing for Elena to take a seat on the examination table. "I'd like to run a comprehensive panel." Elena nodded, rolling up her sleeve. "I've never seen anything like it. The rate exceeds even the most aggressive therapeutic enhancements." Dr. Cho prepared a series of collection devices, her movements precise and practiced. "When was your last full genomic scan?" 6 months ago, during my pre-assignment screening for Aurelia 9, Elena replied. "Everything was normal." Cho made a non-committal sound as she drew blood from Elena's arm. "And you've experienced no unusual symptoms? Fevers, fatigue, unexplained pain?" Elena shook her head. "Nothing. I feel exactly as I always have." "That's more concerning than if you were symptomatic," Cho said quietly, securing the blood sample. "Biological changes this significant should produce noticeable effects." Over the next 2 hours, Elena endured a battery of tests, tissue samples from multiple sites, neural activity monitoring, immune response challenges, each procedure more invasive than the last, and each followed by the same troubled expression on Dr. Cho's face. "What are you seeing?" Elena finally asked as Cho reviewed results on her tablet. "Consistency," Cho replied. "Every system in your body shows the same accelerated regeneration capability. It's as though your entire cellular structure has been—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Optimized." Elena felt her pulse quicken. "That's not possible without leaving evidence of intervention." "I know," Cho said, meeting her gaze directly. "Which means either our detection methods are insufficient, or something completely unknown is at work." She set down her tablet with a finality that suggested the conversation was about to take a serious turn. "The IMC protocol for biological anomalies requires me to ask, have you been in contact with any restricted xenobiological materials or unauthorized enhancement technologies?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Elena understood what was being asked and what was at stake. Unauthorized biological enhancement was a serious offense, one that could end her career and potentially lead to criminal charges after the post-xenocrisis regulations. "No," she said firmly. "Nothing. My work has been entirely within approved parameters." Dr. Cho nodded. But Elena couldn't tell if she believed her. I'm required to report these findings to Captain Mora and the IMC. In the meantime, I'm ordering daily monitoring. Report here each morning at SO 700. As Elena left the medical bay, she felt the weight of suspicion settling around her like a shroud. The station corridor seemed longer than before, the few personnel she passed eyeing her with barely concealed wariness. News had spread fast. She was the anomaly, the potential threat. When she reached her quarters, she immediately accessed her personal terminal, searching for any information that might explain what was happening to her body. Hours passed as she combed through research papers, case studies of unusual regeneration, and even fringe theories about spontaneous evolutionary jumps. Nothing matched what she was experiencing. A notification flashed on her screen. Captain Mora had scheduled a full station council meeting for the following day. Topic: Biological Anomaly Containment Protocols. Elena leaned back in her chair, a cold realization washing over her. She wasn't just a scientific curiosity. She was being treated as a potential biohazard. And on a space station, containment protocols often meant isolation, or worse. Her door chimed, startling her from her thoughts. When she opened it, Axel Wren stood in the corridor, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, glancing past her into the room. Privately, against her better judgment. Elena stepped aside to let him enter. As the door closed behind him, she couldn't help but feel she had just made a decision that would irrevocably alter the course of her life. She had no idea how right she was. Axel moved into Elena's quarters with the cautious efficiency of someone accustomed to assessing new environments. His eyes scanned the room before settling back on her. "Your test results have been classified," he said without preamble. "Access restricted to Captain Mora and IMC officials." Elena crossed her arms. "How do you know that?" A slight smile flickered across his face. "Chief Technical Officer, remember? The station's data architecture is my domain. Accessing restricted medical information is a serious breach of protocol," Elena said, though she felt a spark of interest beneath her disapproval. "So is whatever's happening in your cells," Axel countered. "Look, I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here because something doesn't add up, and inconsistencies in data bother me." Elena studied him, trying to gauge his intentions. His neural interface ports gleamed in the room's soft lighting, a sign of someone who had embraced technological enhancement while maintaining a wary distance from biological modifications. "What inconsistencies?" she finally asked. Axel moved to her terminal and, without asking permission, activated it with a quick gesture. "May I?" Before she could object, his fingers were dancing across the interface, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. A series of medical files appeared, not just hers, but what appeared to be data on multiple station personnel. "This is the baseline regeneration rate for human epithelial cells," he said, pointing to a standard curve. "And this," he continued, pulling up another graph, "is yours. But here's where it gets interesting." He opened another file, and then another. 4 more graphs appeared, each showing cellular regeneration rates well above the human baseline. "What is this?" Elena asked, moving closer to the screen. "Medical data from 5 other crew members," Axel said quietly. "All showing accelerated healing capabilities, not as dramatic as yours, but significantly above normal." Elena felt her heart rate increase. "Who are they?" 2 research scientists, a maintenance technician, a communications specialist, and Dr. Cho herself, Axel replied. "That's impossible," Elena whispered. "Dr. Cho would have mentioned if she had the same condition." "Would she?" Axel raised an eyebrow. "The IMC has been particularly sensitive about biological anomalies since Europa. Career-ending sensitive." Elena sank into a chair, mind racing. "How did you find this?" "I noticed unusual access patterns to the medical database after your initial test results were logged," he explained. Someone was comparing your data to specific personnel files, rather than the general human baseline. I got curious. So now there are 6 of us, Elena said, trying to process the implications. 6 people with unexplained cellular regeneration. What connects us? Axel's expression grew serious. That's what worries me. On the surface, nothing. Different departments, different arrival dates, different Earth origins. But there must be a common factor. Biological anomalies don't spontaneously appear in multiple unrelated individuals. Elena stood and began pacing, her scientific mind already formulating hypotheses. Environmental exposure? Something on the station? Possible, but unlikely, Axel replied. The environmental monitoring systems would have detected any biological or chemical agent. Unless they were programmed not to, Elena said quietly. Their eyes met, the implication hanging heavy between them. The thought that this might be deliberate, that someone might be experimenting on station personnel, was almost too disturbing to contemplate. I need to see the others, Elena decided. Talk to them. Find out if they've experienced any symptoms I haven't noticed in myself. Axel shook his head. Too risky. If this is intentional, alerting the others might trigger whoever's responsible to take action. We need more information first. Elena stopped pacing. We? I wasn't aware we were a team. Officer Wren. A hint of a smile touched his lips. You need someone with access to station systems, and I need someone who understands the biology. Seems like a natural partnership to me. Before Elena could respond, her communicator chimed with an urgent message. The station council meeting had been moved up to immediate. Her presence was required. They're accelerating the containment protocols, she said, a cold dread settling in her stomach. Axel's expression hardened. Then we're running out of time. Go to the meeting. Reveal nothing about what we've discussed. I'll continue digging into the station records. As Elena headed for the door, Axel called after her. Dr. Maris. She turned back to look at him. Be careful. In my experience, people who tamper with biology rarely have benevolent intentions. The council chamber was arranged in a semicircle, with Captain Mora at the center. Elena felt the weight of every gaze as she entered and took her assigned seat. The other department heads were already present, their expressions ranging from clinical interest to barely disguised fear. Dr. Maris, Mora acknowledged her with a nod. Thank you for joining us. As you're aware, your recent medical scans have revealed a biological anomaly that requires our immediate attention. I understand, Captain, Elena replied calmly, despite the tension coiling within her. I'm as concerned as anyone about identifying the cause. Dr. Cho, seated to Mora's right, consulted her tablet. The regeneration rate exhibited by Dr. Maris's cells continues to accelerate. As of this morning's tests, we're observing rates approximately 400% above baseline human capability. A murmur rippled through the assembled department heads. Elena studied Dr. Cho carefully, looking for any sign that the doctor recognized the same condition in herself. There was nothing but professional detachment in her expression. The implications of this anomaly are concerning, Mora continued, particularly given our station's mission following the xenocell crisis. We must consider the possibility of xenobiological contamination. With respect, Captain, Elena interjected. There's no evidence of xenobiological markers in any of my test results. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Doctor, replied the head of xenobiology, a thin man with perpetually narrowed eyes. The European incident began with seemingly benign cellular changes. Elena felt a surge of frustration. The European incident involved clear morphological alterations and genomic instability. My cells show neither. Regardless, Mora cut in. Protocol is clear. Any unexplained biological anomaly must be treated as a potential threat to station safety. She turned to Dr. Cho. What containment options are available to us? Cho's expression remained neutral as she replied, I recommend immediate isolation in the medical quarantine facility, followed by aggressive immunosuppressive therapy to potentially reverse the accelerated regeneration. Elena felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. Immunosuppression? That's an extreme measure with significant risks. Less extreme than an unchecked biological anomaly spreading through the station, the security chief countered. Spreading? Elena couldn't keep the indignation from her voice. There's no evidence this is communicable. Yet, the security chief added ominously. Captain Mora raised a hand to silence the growing tension. Dr. Maris, I understand your concerns. However, the safety of this station and its personnel must take priority. Until we understand what's happening to your cellular structure, containment is our only responsible option. Elena looked around the table, searching for any ally, any voice of reason. She found none. Even those who wouldn't meet her eyes seemed to agree with the captain's assessment. When? She asked simply. Immediately following this meeting, Mora replied. Dr. Cho will escort you to the quarantine facility. Elena felt a cold anger building within her. They were treating her like a specimen, a threat, rather than a colleague. And somewhere in this room, according to Axel's data, sat other individuals with the same condition, silently watching her isolation. And if I refuse? The words left her mouth before she could reconsider. The room grew very still. Captain Mora's expression hardened. That is not an option. Dr. Maris, this is a matter of station security, not personal preference. Elena held Mora's gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. I understand. I would like to gather some personal items from my quarters first. Security will accompany you, Mora said, making it clear this wasn't a request. As the meeting adjourned, Elena felt Dr. Cho's hand on her arm, guiding her toward the door. This is for your own protection as well, Cho said quietly. Is it? Elena replied, just as quietly. Or is it about hiding something you don't want discovered? Dr. Cho's hand tightened momentarily on her arm, a fleeting reaction that confirmed Elena's suspicions more clearly than any words could have. The doctor knew something, and was afraid. The walk to her quarters was silent, the security officer maintaining a careful distance behind her. Elena's mind raced, calculating options, scenarios, escape routes. But there was nowhere to run on a space station, nowhere to hide from the omnipresent surveillance systems. When they reached her door, the security officer stepped forward. I need to enter first, Doctor. Elena nodded, stepping aside. As the door slid open, she held her breath, expecting, hoping, to find Axel still there, perhaps with some critical information that could halt this inexorable slide toward quarantine. The room was empty, or seemed to be, until Elena noticed her terminal screen. It displayed a simple message: Medical Bay 3, Supply Cabinet, midnight. She quickly moved to the terminal and cleared the screen before the security officer could see it. Gathering a few essential items, she took one last look around the space that had been her home for only a short time. I'm ready, she said, though it was a lie. No one could be ready for what was coming. But somewhere in Medical Bay 3, it seemed, was a thread of hope, if she could find a way to reach it. The quarantine facility was located in the most isolated section of the medical wing, separated from the main station by a series of airlocks and decontamination chambers. It was designed to contain the most dangerous biological threats, a prison disguised as a medical ward. As Dr. Cho led her through the final airlock, Elena took in her new surroundings, a single room with transparent walls, medical monitoring equipment built into every surface, and a narrow bed that looked anything but comfortable. You'll have access to the station's information systems, Cho explained, activating the room's features. But all communications will be monitored, and you won't be able to access restricted areas of the database. How long? Elena asked, setting down her small bag of personal items. Dr. Cho wouldn't meet her eyes. "Until we determine you're not a threat." "And the immunosuppressive therapy?" "We'll begin tomorrow morning," Cho replied. "The protocol requires a 24-hour observation period first." Elena sat on the edge of the bed. "This is wrong, and you know it." Dr. Cho finally looked at her, and Elena was surprised to see genuine conflict in the woman's eyes. "What I know," Cho said quietly, "is that following protocol keeps people alive. Deviation leads to incidents like Europa." "Is that what they told you when your own cells started showing accelerated regeneration?" Elena asked boldly. Cho's expression froze, her face paling visibly. "How did you—" "Does the immunosuppressive therapy work, Dr. Cho? Have you tried it on yourself yet?" The medical officer stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Be careful, Dr. Maris. Some questions are dangerous to ask on this station." She glanced at the surveillance cameras mounted in each corner of the quarantine room. "Remember that you're always being watched." With that, she turned and left, the airlock sealing behind her with a definitive hiss. Elena was alone in her transparent cage, surrounded by machines that monitored her every biological function and cameras that recorded her every move. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind working furiously. Midnight was hours away. She had no way to reach Medical Bay 3, no way to access the supply cabinet that supposedly held answers. Or did she? The station operated on a cycle of artificial day and night, dimming lights and reducing staff during the night hours. By 23, the quarantine facility was minimally staffed. Just one medical technician monitoring the control console outside her transparent cell. Elena had spent the intervening hours appearing to accept her situation, reading scientific journals on her provided tablet, eating the bland meal that had been delivered, and generally playing the role of the cooperative patient. All while observing the routines of the medical staff, noting shift changes, and identifying the blind spots in the surveillance system. There weren't many, but she had noticed one critical flaw. The monitoring equipment was designed to track her biological functions, not necessarily her exact position within the quarantine room. The bed was positioned against the wall farthest from the airlock, partially obscured from the primary surveillance camera by a jutting medical cabinet. At 23:45, Elena initiated her plan. She set her tablet to play a series of recorded lectures on cellular biology, dull enough that the night technician wouldn't pay close attention, but normal enough for her documented interests. Then, she carefully positioned her pillow and blanket to create the silhouette of a sleeping form. The next part was the most difficult. The quarantine room's environmental controls were designed to detect any attempt to tamper with the surveillance systems. But they weren't designed to account for someone with Elena's expertise in human physiology. She approached the medical monitoring panel embedded in the wall near her bed. Standard procedure required it to track her vital signs continuously, which meant it needed to maintain connection with her biological signals. What if those signals moved? Carefully, Elena extracted a small device from the heel of her boot, a basic medical transponder she had palmed from her lab before being escorted to the council meeting. Standard equipment, used to relay patient data to monitoring systems. She had modified it during her hours in quarantine, programming it with a recording of her normal vital signs. She activated the transponder and placed it beneath the blankets of her faux sleeping form. Almost immediately, the monitors adjusted to track the signal, now believing it represented Elena's vital functions. The hard part was next. The airlock was biometrically sealed, requiring authorized medical personnel access. But Elena had noticed something during her entry procedure. Dr. Cho had used a specific sequence on the external panel, one that Elena's trained eye had memorized. It was an emergency medical override, designed for situations where the quarantine occupant required immediate intervention. It wouldn't open the airlock directly, but it would trigger an emergency protocol, and that might create the opportunity she needed. Staying in the camera's blind spot, Elena moved to the internal communication panel near the airlock. Emergency medical situation, she spoke clearly into the panel. Patient experiencing severe respiratory distress. The system immediately activated, flashing warning lights outside the quarantine zone. Elena quickly returned to her bed, lying beside the transponder, and began simulating symptoms of respiratory failure, gasping, clutching at her throat. The night technician looked up from his console in alarm, then hit the emergency response button. Seconds later, alarms sounded throughout the medical wing. Elena continued her performance, knowing that the response team would be required to follow emergency entry protocols, including the sequence she had observed Dr. Cho use. Within minutes, the outer door of the airlock opened, and 2 medical staff in containment suits rushed in. As they cycled through the airlock, Elena positioned herself near the inner door, still feigning distress. The moment the inner door opened, she collapsed against the first responder, sending them both stumbling back into the airlock chamber. In the confusion, she managed to hit the emergency cycle button on the inner panel, sealing the airlock with her and 1 medical responder inside, while leaving the second responder trapped in the quarantine room. "What are you doing?" the suited figure demanded, reaching for the override controls. Elena acted quickly, targeting the suit's vulnerability, the oxygen connection valve at the neck. With a precise movement, she partially disengaged it, causing the suit's warning systems to activate. The responder immediately focused on fixing their suit breach, giving Elena the seconds she needed. She completed the airlock cycle, opening the outer door, and slipped past the distracted medical worker into the main corridor. Alarms were blaring throughout the medical wing, but the emergency had been localized to the quarantine zone, exactly as Elena had hoped. The rest of the wing was momentarily unattended as staff responded to the quarantine alert, moving quickly but calmly, as though she belonged. Elena made her way to Medical Bay 3. The main lights were dimmed for night cycle, with only emergency lighting illuminating her path. She encountered no one. All available personnel were responding to her medical emergency. Medical Bay 3 was deserted when she arrived. Elena moved directly to the supply cabinet mentioned in Axel's message, her heart pounding. It was locked, of course, requiring medical staff credentials. Looking for this, Elena spun around to find Axel emerging from the shadows of an adjacent room. He held up a medical access card. "How did you get out of your quarters before security arrived? Or acquire a medical access card?" He smiled slightly. "The first rule of station security. Electronic locks are only as good as the people programming them." He approached the cabinet and swiped the card. The lock disengaged with a soft click. "We don't have much time," he said, opening the cabinet doors. "Your diversion was impressive, but they'll figure it out soon." Inside the cabinet, tucked behind rows of standard medical supplies, was a small container marked with the logo of Novogen Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest medical corporations in the solar system. "What is this?" Elena asked as Axel handed her the container. "Open it!" he urged, keeping watch on the door. Inside was a series of vials containing a pale blue liquid, along with detailed administration protocols and, most significantly, a list of test subjects identified only by serial numbers. "Cellular acceleration compound," Elena read from the label. "Experimental phase 3. She looked up at Axel, realization dawning. "They're experimenting on us." "Not just experimenting," Axel corrected grimly. "According to the files I accessed, every new arrival to Aurelia 9 for the past 6 months has been receiving microdoses of this compound in their initial medical screening. You, me, everyone. They're using the entire station as a test lab." Elena felt a cold rage building within her. Without consent, without oversight, she examined the documentation more closely. This violates every ethical standard in medical research. "It gets worse," Axel said, pulling out a data tablet from his jacket. The compound isn't just enhancing cellular regeneration. It's designed to make human tissue more adaptable to non-terrestrial environments. It's preparation for deep space colonization. Forced evolution, Elena whispered. The implications staggering. They're trying to change what it means to be human. The distant sound of voices in the corridor broke their moment of revelation. The search for Elena had expanded beyond the quarantine zone. "We need to move," Axel said urgently, taking the container from her and securing it in his pack. "I've prepared a safe location in the maintenance tunnels. We can analyze this further there." "Wait," Elena said, grabbing his arm. "We need to warn the others. The whole station is being used as guinea pigs." Axel's expression hardened. "That's exactly why we need to be careful. We don't know who's involved, who's complicit. For all we know, Captain Mora authorized this." Elena hesitated, torn between the need for immediate action and the recognition that they needed more information. The other 5 showing accelerated regeneration. They deserve to know. "And they will," Axel assured her. "But first, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." He gestured toward the corridor. "The maintenance access is this way. We can reach it before they lock down this section." With a final glance at the medical bay, Elena followed Axel into the corridor. They moved swiftly, but cautiously, avoiding the main thoroughfares where security would be concentrating their search. The maintenance tunnels were narrow, dimly lit passages that ran behind the primary systems of the station, allowing technical crews to access critical infrastructure. They were not designed for comfort, but they offered one crucial advantage. They were outside the normal surveillance network. Axel led Elena through a confusing maze of junctions and access hatches, clearly following a memorized path. Finally, they arrived at a small chamber that had been converted into a makeshift workspace. A portable terminal sat on a folding table, surrounded by various technical tools and emergency supplies. "Welcome to my contingency plan," Axel said, securing the hatch behind them. "I've never fully trusted station administration. Too many secrets." "You've been planning for something like this," Elena observed, taking in the carefully organized space. "Let's just say I've learned to prepare for worst-case scenarios," he replied, activating the terminal. "Now, let's see what NovaGen has been doing to us." For the next several hours, they analyzed the contents of the container and the accompanying documentation. The cellular acceleration compound, or CAC7 as it was designated in the files, was far more sophisticated than either of them had initially realized. "It's not just enhancing regeneration," Elena said, studying the molecular structure displayed on the terminal. "It's selectively modifying how cells respond to environmental stressors. Look at these receptor configurations. They're designed to adapt to radiation exposure, pressure changes, even microgravity degradation. The perfect preparation for long-term space habitation." Axel noted grimly. "But why the secrecy? Why not develop this openly?" Elena scrolled through more of the documentation. "Because the compound fundamentally alters human cellular function. It's not temporary enhancement. It's permanent modification of how human biology works." She pointed to a section of data. "And look at this. Phase Y and 2 trials showed a 32% fatality rate. They're risking our lives without consent." "But why you?" Axel questioned. "Why are you and the other 5 showing such dramatic results when the rest of us received the same compound?" Elena frowned, considering. "Genetic predisposition, perhaps, or maybe—" She stopped, a terrible thought forming. What if we're not all receiving the same dosage? What if some of us are control subjects, some low dose, some high dose? Axel's expression darkened. Human experimentation, with the station as the laboratory and all of us as unwitting test subjects. He turned to another section of the data. According to this, NovaGen has research contracts with the Interplanetary Medical Council, They're not acting alone. The IMC is supposed to prevent exactly this kind of ethical violation, Elena said, disbelief coloring her voice. They were formed after the medical abuses during the early colonization period. Power corrupts, Axel said simply. And there's enormous power in controlling human biological adaptation to space. A notification flashed on the terminal. The station's security alert had been upgraded. All personnel were now instructed to report any sighting of Dr. Elena Maris, described as unstable and potentially contagious. They're using the Europa playbook, Elena said bitterly. Label the threat as biological, and everyone becomes too afraid to help. It buys us time to formulate a plan, Axel replied, turning back to the data. I've isolated our communication here, but we'll need to move eventually. The maintenance tunnels are one of the first places they'll search once they organize a proper sweep. Elena nodded, already thinking ahead. We need evidence that can't be denied or covered up. Something that will force an external investigation. She gestured to the vials. These are a start, but easily dismissed as planted evidence. What about a live demonstration? Axel suggested. Your accelerated healing is visual proof that something unusual is happening. Not enough. Elena shook her head. They'll claim I self-modified, that it's an isolated case. She tapped the terminal thoughtfully. But if we could demonstrate that multiple station personnel are affected and link it directly to Novagen's compound, we'd need access to the station's communication array to transmit to external authorities, Axel pointed out. And that's the most heavily secured system on Aurelia 9. Elena's eyes lit with sudden determination. Not the most secure. The Interplanetary Medical Council maintains a direct, encrypted channel for biological emergency notifications. It bypasses station controls entirely, a lesson learned after communication failures during previous outbreaks. And you have access to this channel? As a registered IMC researcher, yes. Elena smiled grimly. The irony is perfect. We'll use their own emergency system to expose them. Axel nodded, already calculating. We'll need to reach a medical terminal with IMC connectivity. That means returning to the medical wing. Not just any terminal, Elena corrected. It needs to be a primary research station with full IMC protocol clearance. She thought for a moment. There's one in the Advanced Research Lab. It's where I was originally assigned to work. Security will be watching that area closely, Axel warned. They know your background. Yes, Elena agreed. But they're expecting a desperate escape attempt, not a return to the most obvious location. She began gathering the vials and documentation. And we have one advantage they don't expect. What's that? Elena held up one of the vials of CAC-7. We know exactly what this does, and more importantly, how to use it. The plan they formulated was dangerous, relying on precise timing and the predictable response patterns of station security. While the search for Elena continued, focusing on outer sections and potential escape routes, they would move through the maintenance tunnels to a junction near the Advanced Research Lab. The night cycle ends in 3 hours, Axel said, checking the station chronometer. Shift change will create momentary confusion we can exploit. Elena nodded, finishing her modifications to one of the vials of CAC-7. She had adjusted the concentration based on the documentation, creating what should be a fast-acting but temporary enhancement to their already accelerated cellular functions. This should increase our physical capabilities for approximately 30 minutes, she explained. Faster healing, enhanced stamina, increased sensory processing. After that, there will be a significant crash as the compound metabolizes. Enough time to access the lab, transmit the evidence, and reach an escape pod? Axel asked. If everything goes perfectly, Elena replied, not bothering to mask the doubt in her voice. The escape pod is a last resort. Once we transmit, the IMC external monitors will be alerted. In theory, they should intervene to protect whistleblowers. Theory and practice often diverge dramatically, Axel noted dryly. Hence the escape pod contingency. Elena agreed. She handed him one of the modified vials. We inject only if absolutely necessary. The compound at this concentration hasn't been tested. We're extrapolating from the documentation. Axel took the vial, studying it thoughtfully. It's fitting, in a way. They experimented on us without consent. Now we use their own creation against them. With consent, Elena emphasized. That's the difference between us and them. As they prepared to leave the maintenance tunnel, gathering only what was essential for their mission, Elena found herself watching Axel. His focus and adaptability had surprised her. He'd gone from suspicious technical officer to committed ally in less than a day. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "You're risking everything." Axel paused, his expression becoming distant. Before Aurelia 9, I was stationed on Ganymede Colony. I had a sister there, Lydia. She volunteered for what was described as a routine medical study. It wasn't. His voice hardened. They were testing early xenobiological adaptation compounds. 37 test subjects, 35 deaths, including Lydia. The company responsible? A Novagen subsidiary. "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly. "They buried it," Axel continued. "Classified it as an unfortunate research anomaly. No investigations. No accountability." He met her gaze directly. "I transferred to Aurelia 9 because I tracked connections between that program and research being conducted here. I've been looking for proof ever since." "And now we have it," Elena said. "Now we have it," he agreed. "And unlike my sister, we have a chance to expose them." With that, they sealed their pact. Two unlikely allies, drawn together by circumstance and a shared determination to reveal a truth that powerful interests wanted to keep hidden. The journey through the maintenance tunnels was tense but uneventful. Station security was focused on more obvious escape routes, giving them precious time to approach the advanced research lab undetected. When they finally reached the access panel nearest the lab, Axel checked the security feed on his portable scanner. "Two guards posted outside the main entrance," he reported. "Standard protocol. They're expecting you to avoid high-security areas." Elena nodded, reviewing the lab layout on the scanner. "The emergency exit on the east side is designed for rapid evacuation during containment breaches. It's one way, with no external access panel." "Perfect for our needs," Axel agreed. "But how do we trigger it to open from the outside?" Elena smiled slightly. We trigger a localized containment alert inside the lab." She pointed to a small junction box located in the ceiling of the maintenance tunnel. "That connects to the lab's environmental monitoring system. A sudden pressure fluctuation would register as a potential breach." Axel raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Creating a false emergency to open an emergency exit. Elegant. Working quickly. They modified the pressure sensors in the junction box, creating a spike that would register as a dangerous atmosphere anomaly within the lab. As predicted, the automated safety systems responded immediately, sealing the main entrance and opening the emergency exit to allow for hypothetical evacuation. The moment the emergency exit opened, they moved, slipping from the maintenance tunnel into the lab. They had perhaps 2 minutes before security overrode the automated protocols and investigated. The advanced research lab was state-of-the-art, filled with equipment that would have normally fascinated Elena. Now, she focused solely on the primary research terminal located at the center of the room. It would have IMC connectivity, her direct line to outside authorities. "Watch the doors," she instructed Axel as she activated the terminal. "This will take precise timing." While Axel positioned himself to monitor both the main entrance and the emergency exit, Elena accessed the IMC emergency protocols. Her credentials were still active. They hadn't had time to revoke her access yet. Working swiftly, she began compiling the evidence, the Novagen documentation, Analysis of the CAC-7 compound. Medical data showing the anomalous regeneration patterns in 6 station personnel. And her own testimony documenting the forced experimentation. "Hurry," Axel urged, his voice tense. "Security override in progress on the main door." Elena completed the evidence package and prepared it for transmission through the IMC emergency channel. This was the moment of truth. Once sent, there would be no hiding what they'd done. "Transmitting now," she said, initiating the sequence. The terminal displayed the progress bar, 20%, 35%, 48%. A loud clang echoed through the lab as the security override engaged on the main door. It wouldn't open immediately. Safety protocols required a full atmospheric check before allowing entry after a containment alert. But they had seconds, not minutes. "We need to move," Axel said, moving toward the emergency exit. "Not yet," Elena insisted, watching the transmission progress. "If we leave before it completes, they can terminate it remotely." 67%, 73%, 84%. The main door's locks disengaged with a hiss. Security would enter momentarily. "Elena, now!" Axel urged. 94%, 98%, 100%. Transmission complete. The moment the confirmation appeared. Elena grabbed the data tablet containing their backup evidence and joined Axel at the emergency exit. They slipped through just as the main door began to open. Security personnel visible in the corridor beyond. "Where now?" Elena asked as they hurried away from the lab. "Escape pod bay is 2 levels down," Axel replied. "But they'll lock it down immediately once they realize what we've done." As if on cue, the station's alert system activated, the captain's voice echoing through the corridors. "Attention all personnel. Security lockdown in effect. Dr. Elena Maris and Technical Officer Axel Wren are to be detained on site. They are considered a severe biological hazard. Approach with extreme caution." "They're not taking chances," Elena observed grimly. "And neither should we," Axel replied, pulling out the modified vial of CAC-7. "I think it's time for our pharmaceutical advantage." Elena nodded, retrieving her own vial. Together, they administered the compound, injecting it into their forearms as they continued moving toward the nearest vertical access shaft. The effect was almost immediate. Elena felt a surge of energy flow through her body, her senses sharpening dramatically. Colors became more vivid, sounds more distinct, and her awareness of her surroundings expanded to an almost overwhelming degree. "This is," Axel began, his voice trailing off as he adjusted to the sensations. "Incredible," Elena finished. "And terrifying. I can see why NovaGen wants to control this technology." With their enhanced capabilities, they moved through the station with unprecedented speed and agility. When they encountered a security checkpoint, they were able to evade detection by timing their movements to exploit the guards' blind spots, seeing opportunities that would have been invisible to their normal perception. They reached the vertical access shaft that would take them to the escape pod level, but found it locked down, standard procedure during a security alert. "We'll have to find another way," Elena said, her enhanced mind already calculating alternatives. "Wait," Axel replied, studying the access panel. "The lockdown is electronic, but the emergency release is mechanical." He pointed to a small, recessed handle designed for use during power failures. "It will trigger alarms," Elena warned. "They already know where we are," Axel countered. "Speed matters more than stealth now." He activated the emergency release, and the access hatch opened with a screech of protesting metal. Alarms immediately blared throughout the corridor, but they were already descending the ladder within the shaft, moving with the preternatural quickness granted by the CAC-7. 2 levels down, they emerged into a corridor leading to the escape pod bay. As expected, security personnel were stationed at the entrance, 4 guards with stun weapons drawn. "We need a diversion," Elena whispered, their enhanced hearing allowing them to communicate despite the blaring alarms. Axel nodded toward an engineering panel on the nearby wall. Environmental controls. If we can create a pressure warning in this section, they'd be forced to investigate. Elena finished the thought. Do it. While Elena kept watch, Axel quickly accessed the panel and initiated a false pressure warning for the section containing the guards. As predicted, station protocol required them to investigate. 2 remained at the entrance while 2 moved to check the supposedly compromised area. Now we have even odds, Axel said. With our enhancement, we can handle 2 guards. Elena wasn't comfortable with the idea of fighting their way through. These were colleagues doing their jobs, not enemies. There's another option, she said, pointing to a secondary maintenance passage that ran parallel to the main corridor. That connects to the pod bay emergency airlock. It's designed for evacuation if the main entrance is compromised. They use their enhanced strength to pry open the maintenance access panel and slip into the narrow passage beyond. Moving quickly through the cramped space, they reach the emergency airlock connecting to the escape pod bay. Almost there, Elena said as they prepared to open the final hatch. Suddenly, Axel winced, grabbing his arm where they had injected the CAC-7. Something's wrong, he gasped. Burning sensation, spreading from the injection site. Elena felt it too. A growing pain radiating outward from her forearm, accompanied by an uncomfortable throbbing in her temples. The compound is metabolizing faster than expected, she realized. We're hitting the crash phase early. Bad timing, Axel grimaced, forcing himself to continue despite the increasing discomfort. They emerged from the maintenance passage into the escape pod bay, just as the enhanced effects of the CAC-7 began to fade, replaced by waves of nausea and muscle tremors. The bay contained 6 escape pods, each designed to carry up to 4 passengers away from the station in an emergency. We only need 1, Elena said, moving toward the nearest pod. Her movements were becoming sluggish as the compound's side effects intensified. Just as they reached the pod, the main bay doors opened. Captain Mora entered, flanked by Dr. Cho and a security team. All wore protective gear, as if approaching a biohazard zone. That's far enough. Dr. Maris. Officer Wren, Mora called, her voice amplified through her suit's speaker. There's nowhere left to go. Elena and Axel stood their ground beside the escape pod, both fighting the increasingly debilitating effects of the CAC-7 crash. We've transmitted everything, Captain, Elena said, struggling to keep her voice steady. The Novagen experiments, the unauthorized testing on station personnel, all of it. The IMC external monitors have the data now. You've endangered this entire station with your actions, Mora replied coldly. The research being conducted here was authorized at the highest levels. Authorized by whom? Axel demanded. Not by the people you used as test subjects without their knowledge or consent. Dr. Cho stepped forward. The modifications were designed to help humanity, not harm it. The compound represents our best hope for long-term space habitation. At what cost? Elena challenged, noticing that Cho was not looking directly at her. You knew, Doctor. You knew you were one of the test subjects showing accelerated results. Yet you said nothing when they ordered my quarantine. A flicker of shame crossed Cho's face. The benefits outweighed the risks. Sometimes progress requires compromises. Human experimentation isn't a compromise. Axel spat. It's a crime, one that killed my sister on Ganymede. Captain Mora signaled to the security team. This discussion is over. You will both be placed in isolated containment until representatives from the IMC arrive to address this situation. Elena knew what that meant. Time for Novagen and their allies to create a cover story, to classify the evidence as a security threat, to ensure that the truth never reached the public. We're not going back into a cage, she said firmly, despite the tremors now visible in her hands. You don't have a choice, Mora replied. Security, take them. As the security team advanced, Elena made a split-second decision. She slammed her palm against the escape pod's emergency launch sequence, overriding the normal departure protocols. The pod's door slid open automatically. "Get in!" she urged Axel, who was now visibly struggling with the CAC-7 side effects. Together, they stumbled into the pod just as the security team reached them. The door sealed automatically once they were inside, the launch sequence already in progress. "Override the launch," Mora ordered, but it was too late. The escape pod systems were designed to function independently from station control during emergencies, a safety feature that now worked in their favor. Through the pod's viewport, Elena watched as Captain Mora and the others were forced to retreat from the launch area. Seconds later, the pod detached from the station with a violent jolt, thrusting them into the void of space. The small craft stabilized automatically, its navigation system already plotting a course to the nearest IMC outpost, standard protocol for emergency evacuations. Elena and Axel collapsed into the pod seats, both now fully experiencing the aftermath of the enhanced CAC-7. Waves of pain radiated through their bodies as their accelerated cells struggled to return to normal function. "Did we," Axel began, his voice weak, "did we really make it out?" Elena looked through the viewport at the receding shape of Aurelia 9. "For now," she replied. "But this is just the beginning." "The transmission," Axel winced as another wave of pain hit him. "Will it be enough?" Elena met his gaze, determination burning through the physical discomfort. "It has to be. We've exposed what they're doing, but that's only part of the story." "What do you mean?" Axel asked. Elena gestured to their trembling bodies. "Look at us. Look at what the compound does. This isn't just about unethical research practices. It's about the future of humanity itself." Understanding dawned in Axel's eyes. "They're trying to change what it means to be human, to create a new baseline for our species. Without discussion, without consent." Elena nodded. "They're making decisions that will affect generations to come, all behind closed doors." As the escape pod carried them farther from the station, their thoughts turned to what awaited them. The IMC might protect them as whistleblowers, or they might be complicit in the experiment. Novagen had powerful allies, and corporations of its size rarely faced real consequences for their actions. But they had done what they could. They had revealed the truth, and now others would have to decide what to do with it. "What happens when we reach the IMC outpost?" Axel asked, his pain gradually subsiding as their bodies processed the last of the enhanced compound. Elena looked out at the stars, contemplating the vastness of space and the smallness of human concerns within it. "We continue the fight," she said simply. "We make sure the truth spreads faster than they can contain it." "And the compound? The people already affected?" That was the question that had been haunting Elena since they discovered the truth. Hundreds of station personnel had been unwittingly modified. Their cells were now operating according to parameters set by Novagen researchers, not natural human biology. What did that mean for their future, their children, the evolution of the human species? "Nothing about human bodies makes sense anymore," she said quietly. "And that's terrifying. But it's also our responsibility now. We need to understand what they've done to us, to find a way to give people back control over their own biology." As the escape pod continued its journey toward an uncertain reception at the IMC outpost, Elena and Axel knew they were carrying more than just evidence of corporate malfeasance. They were carrying a fundamental question about humanity's future. Who should control the evolution of our species? The answer, they believed, shouldn't belong to corporations operating in shadows, but to humanity as a whole. And that was a battle that was just beginning. The stars seemed to watch impassively as the tiny craft carried its passengers toward an uncertain destiny. Two people forever changed, fighting for the right of all humans to determine their own biological fate in a universe that grew more complex with each passing moment. Behind them, Aurelia 9 continued its silent orbit, a gleaming monument to human achievement that now harbored a dark secret, one that would soon send shockwaves throughout human civilization. For on that station, the most fundamental question of the space age was being decided without debate or consent. What does it mean to be human? And who gets to decide when that definition changes? Elena and Axel had chosen their answer. Now it was humanity's turn to choose.